Have you ever played a game so artistic, so poignant, so relatable, and felt nothing but emptiness as the credits rolled? That you felt like you even faced some of your own trauma, and yet there was no healing, no true confronting of the problem? That, sure, you played this fantastic game that talked about some problems that you yourself deal with, but that you can't help but feel a crushing hollowness from the whole experience. That perhaps there are no happy endings or objective morals, just gray, bittersweet conclusions. He Fucked the Girl Out of Me is one of the hardest games I've ever had to sit through, and yet I would also call it a relatively easy experience. A very short walking simulator akin to mouthwashing with very rudimentary graphics and literally no sound, one would expect it to rot deep within the Steam catalog. But when a single game can encapsulate such a traumatic experience, even if only semi-biographical, well, people will find a way to see it. It'll even win awards. And I won't say this because it's such a beautiful game, because honestly, it depicts a life that is not beautiful, not romanticized, nor critical. It is simply a life that is lived. If you haven't played or seen the game, here are some trigger warnings the game provides. I would ask you to take them very seriously, as this is far from an easy game to digest. There's a lot here that can be very triggering. We start the game on a very bitter note, with this. So, yeah, this is the kind of game we're going to be getting into today. And I want you to know, dear viewer, that I'll not be censoring anything in this video, as while it is very traumatic, it's also important. People need to know these stories. There is no universal good or bad. There is only perspective. In this cruel world we live in, there is no agreed upon morals when it comes to these kinds of things. Whether that be rooted in transphobia in this case or something else entirely, at best we normally shy away from stories like this one. At worst, we take advantage of them, thinking something so horrible can be erotic because we don't value the person on the other side of the trauma. We don't see them as worthy, as even being a human, simply because we don't directly relate to them. And I'm not claiming this is everyone, but what I am saying is that humanity's worst is something we have to see and acknowledge. And then, with the third NPC, we have this. As if it's her fault. As if she was to blame. I find myself stuck in the middle of this supposed male loneliness epidemic. While I can acknowledge that the patriarchy itself is built in such a way that leads to this loneliness, for a variety of reasons I don't find pertinent to this specific video, what I will say is that, well, it's just not her fault. While she wasn't explicitly forced into the situation, you'll see throughout this video she was certainly coerced and even manipulated into it. Just because she wished to be a girl legally. To be recognized as what she had always had been, a woman. But, of course, some won't accept that. They will earnestly blame the sex worker, the OnlyFans model, the porn star, when in reality it was always the wider system that made them believe there is no other avenue for them to go down. It teaches girls at a young age that they are worth only as much as their body, as their face. And you could say that's not true, but look at it this way. How does a young girl feel when some men claim a woman is too emotional to be president? How does a young girl feel when they are told stories of knights saving the beautiful princess and rarely the other way around? And especially, how is a young girl to feel when they can feel the heat of the gaze of older men staring at them? Even if not explicitly sexually at the time, but instead measuring up their potential when they do become full-fledged women. The male gaze. Separate from the example I just talked about, it can be caused by all of these things. A second self that tells the conscious self what to do, how to dress, that they will never be loved unless they're cute. And when all you want is to be loved, well, you may just do anything for it. It will, even if subconsciously, dictate your decisions. It's very obviously not just about the money. Even if in the game Anne needs it to legally transition, I don't think it's just about that. As she says many times, she just wanted to be loved. And yet to be loved as a girl in this world is to, most of the time at least, fit into societal standards that they did not create. Unless, of course, you go too far. Then you're not cute anymore. You're just a... Everything you know has been taught to you. And with stuff like this, it's messy beyond comprehension. And to best explain my thoughts on this general concept, specifically the male gaze, I'll use an excerpt from my mouth-watering analysis. Here's a timestamp to skip spoilers for that game, as well as Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Again, it's a relatively simple concept to understand, the male gaze, but it's very hard to actually combat. Not to get political, but I've seen many men specifically when talking about the most recent US election say rather distasteful things to and about women who voted openly for Trump. And like, I certainly get it, I hate Trump too, but let's take a step back for a second. As a man, I outright don't think it's your place to make such comments. But at the same time, we can recognize the internalized oppression many women face, so much so that it shapes their very opinions. I personally think Trump is a bad thing for women on many different fronts, some more obvious than others, and yet, women still voted for him. And the vast majority had what they at least believed to be a good reason for doing that, even though I disagree with them, but a loud minority are openly anti-feminist. I believe the term is trad wife, someone who believes very strongly in traditional gender roles. And this is where it gets complex, friends, because I believe everyone should live the life they want. And if being a traditional stay-at-home mom to a family of 5, the dog included of course, makes someone happy, then I'm all for it. Who am I to say, especially as a man, that they're wrong for that? But we have to acknowledge here that they are raised in a society that tells them that's who they should be. So much so that their very desires are completely molded around that ideal. I think this very beautifully circles back to Cyberpunk Edgerunners, and David Martinez specifically. And now it's time for more excerpts. Sorry, LOL. I promise it's for a good reason. Oh yeah, and skip to this timestamp to avoid Edgerunner spoilers. And yet, despite the choices he made, he still ended up in that cyberskeleton anyway, because often there are external factors that go beyond our control. Faraday's power-hungry attitude just can't be accounted for in David's plans. Yes, David always could have just walked away, and the show is clearly trying to tell us that he should have, but to call him stupid for not doing so would be missing the point. Those external factors beyond our control, they're what shape us. In a way, we kind of are those factors. Even Faraday, who serves as the final external wrench in David's life and ultimately his doom, is himself a man completely influenced by the external factors around him that are beyond his control. Edgerunners goes out of its way to show how different he is from the actual Corpos. How his desperate scramble for wealth and power is compared to the relaxed, honestly indifferent attitude of the Corpos who are actually in power. They see Faraday as nothing more than a dog, just as Faraday sees David. If he had been born into different circumstances, his entire attitude here would be completely different. He also wouldn't even be Faraday. In this way, Faraday himself is kind of this desperate scramble. So again, we have to apply the same logic to David. He does have a choice, yes, but any choice he does make almost completely hinges on everything in his life that came before. The dreams of his mom in Maine, his disregard for his own life, his anatomy that makes him able to handle cyberware at a high level, his love for Lucy, and most importantly, the place he was born, Night City. There are no happy endings here because there were never any happy beginnings. To me, that is the biggest tragedy of Edgerunners. Seeing David at the top of Arasaka Tower, shifting in and out of full-blown cyberpsychosis, smiling and exclaiming to his mom that he finally made it there, to the very top of Arasaka. He never needed a dream, he just needed a path. This climb up the corporate ladder had been repeated to him over and over by his mother, to the point where it was ingrained into his very soul. He just never realized it until these final moments, if he ever really did. But this is Night City, and he's a slum kid. The system never had a way for someone like him to make it to the top of that tower from the inside. No, perhaps this was the only way. Perhaps this was the only way he would ever be able to climb this tower, predetermined by his mother's one and dying wish since the day he was born, from the outside. It's a beautifully tragic moment, because as we've discussed, the most devastating parts of oppression are internal. Believing that your life has no value, pursuing goals unconsciously forced upon you by others, whole groups of people putting themselves down for committing crime and violent acts, even though it was the grander system that instilled this into them to begin with. It's much more nuanced than that. Not to sound like a cliche here, but you can leave Night City, but Night City won't leave you. Not so easily. Self-eternalized oppression, obviously caused by external oppression, is much, much harder to rid yourself of. Especially when a lot of it is thought to be the result of intergenerational trauma in many respected groups of thought. It's all getting quite complex, isn't it? My grander point here is that any dreams or desires one may have are ultimately derived from external influence, and society's influence more specifically. A trad wife may want to fulfill a traditional gender role, but she only wants to do that most likely because that's what she's been taught to want, because of the male gaze, that internalized second self. Of course, we do need to draw a line here, even I realize that. We must understand these concepts, but this long, long road does inevitably ask the question, well, what even are you then? Do you have free will? And to answer that, I'd recommend going to watch all of my Doki Doki Literature Club videos, as I won't be distracting from the thesis of this video and talking about them. God knows I've already talked about it enough on the channel. When discussing the male gaze, I think the best example I always give is Dante's Divine Comedy, and the character of Beatrice specifically. An angelic figure meant to guide and thus save Dante. And Beatrice was actually a person in real life, at least it's theorized she existed. And Dante supposedly only met her on 2 occasions, yet became so in love with her he wrote multiple works based around her, and included her in the end of Purgatorio and in the entirety of Paradiso, which says a lot about Dante, but we won't be opening that can of worms today. This, to me, is the ultimate example of the male gaze. It is a man who immortalized the story of a woman, creating art around her that would go on to influence what other girls and women desired and thought of themselves. He taught them what love should be through his eyes, and gave them no opportunity to use their own minds to figure it out for themselves. I said this in my college thesis paper on my favorite novel ever, After Image, but I'll say it again here. The history of art is the history of the subjugation of women. We as people look to stories to tell us who we should be, what we should want. We look at fictional characters and try to model ourselves after them at a very young age. We are read bedtime stories as kids of a knight saving a princess, played romantic music, shown beautiful paintings of love, all crafted through the hands of a man. Thankfully, times have changed and women are slowly gaining more power and influence and creating more art, but that stuff still has a way of sticking. Maybe you weren't told those kind of bedtime stories as a child, but your parents sure were, and their parents, and their parents, and so on and so forth. Centuries of subjugation isn't suddenly just erased, as there is a shared lineage of oppression passed down by men, and even by other women. Anya is a victim of this. The game intentionally doesn't really give her the spotlight. It morphs her opinion of her as a shy and timid girl based entirely on Jimmy's opinion of her. She was a victim of sexual assault, which, voiceover note here, is basically what the story is mostly about, and yet we never really get to see her journey through that. Just glimpses. And again, I think that's intentional. That the game is trying to draw attention to this and make us ask ourselves why we can't simply write a section in a video essay strictly about Anya and the game's story, and instead go on a tirade about the male gaze in an anime that has nothing to do with mouthwashing. And don't worry, friends, because the meta commentary of this video gets even deeper. As you've heard me talk about the male gaze, you've probably forgotten the fact that I too am a man, piecing together the story of a woman. As I said, I have absolutely no place to tell women how to live their lives. And yet, here I am telling you about all of this, trying to influence your opinion. Quite a contradiction, isn't it? Quote over. Now, when it comes to trans women, I think the problem is the same in theory, but maybe even a bit worse. Because the body you were born into was not a woman's body, and you desperately want to cling onto feminine principles. Again, those dictated by a male-run society to become the girl you always wanted to be, that you always were. Because you were not born into a girl's body, you will, in some cases, do anything to feel as if you were. Now, I will let the game give some of its thoughts on this phenomenon, most of which I agree with myself. And to start, she is confused. As you walk in the game, the doors disappear. There aren't many options for a young trans girl who isn't accepted, and there are even less avenues for recovery. In Anne's eyes, there is only one way: an impulsive decision. Then we get into an explanation on the US's pre-Affordable Care Act, a time where transitioning was not covered by insurance, which I find to be obvious bullshit. Dreams of Gatorade gummies. An elusive dream that seems unattainable at the current moment. In desperate need for money, Anne makes that impulsive decision, spurred on by Sally, a fellow trans girl. A girl Anne had a crush on. Anne just wants to legally transition, and with no other avenues, Sally suggests sugaring, which is essentially just being an escort. And here, Sally is undeniably coercing Anne into a decision that just isn't the right one. And while it seems like a relatively innocent suggestion at first, we come to see throughout the rest of the game that Sally is just a bit manipulative. And while I do feel like she had Anne's best intentions at her heart, you have to understand that Sally is a broken person. All of the trauma that Anne will encounter is something Sally has already been through. And while trauma responses are never the same between two people, Sally's suggestion here comes from a place of pain, of shame. And then we have the phone call, where Sally tells an older man that Anne is her virgin stepsister that just turned 18. And the disgust I felt from this is unspeakable, as I'm well aware that these are common talking points, something to be desired, when in discussions centered around pornography. I've already said my general thoughts on this in my response video to the Anya analysis, so now I'll provide an excerpt from that video here, overlaid with footage from the game we're talking about now. Rape is fetishized in every country on this planet. And while some are more obvious than others, I'm looking at you, Japan. Even in the US, where I'm from, this is the case. I mean, for fuck's sake, our newly elected president is a convicted rapist. Porn does a lot of harm to people, even down to their very brain chemistry. But perhaps the worst thing it does is perpetuate this fetishization. Yet, it also exposes it. I mean, do you really think it's a coincidence that the popular videos on US porn sites are teen, just turned 18, and stepsis content? Seriously, there is a concentrated effort to push out, let's call it what it is, pedophilic, incestuous, and rape-adjacent content out to young, impressionable boys. This is to the point where Pornhub, instead of installing better age requirements for gatekeeping its content, instead has opted to literally shut down servers in several US states. Of course, this isn't technically pedophilia. I mean, they are 18, but come on. They know what they're doing. I know what they're doing. You know what they're doing. I will not insult your intelligence by explaining the mental gymnastics they're pulling off here to skirt the line of societal acceptability and illegal behavior. This is also true of porn that is so BDSM that it is essentially just made for people that wish to sexually assault women. But of course, in many ways, porn dictates what is societally acceptable anyway. Men run this world, and virtually all men consumed pornographic material in their youth in this modern era. Material that has shaped not just how they view women and themselves, but even how they view morality itself. Yeah, I think you get the point. As Sally goes over the rules, she says something interesting. Women hire therapists, men hire sex workers. And this is the point where I feel I have to have some sympathy for most boys and men out there. That we aren't allowed to express our emotions in an actual healthy way. Or rather, that we feel like we can't. And this is, again, a product of the patriarchal society we live in, as virtually all women out there aren't just receptive to men expressing themselves, but actually actively want it. But instead, young boys are taught by other men, and even some select women, to repress it, to keep it locked away. And when you teach that, you are also teaching these young boys to find vices in other things, to heal their crippling loneliness through other means. Don't cry. Go masturbate. And then Sally instills a lesson in Anne that she will carry on even to this day. Their relationships are simply a give and take transaction. That's all there is to it. And for the final lesson, to smile. To never show that you're in pain, no matter what. After all, pain is such a turnoff. Once we get to the date, we are given the objective to make him love you. To answer carefully. His hug felt warm, made Anne miss her family. And for the first choice, I don't really think it matters what the player chooses. I don't even think most of the choices make a real difference. Anne is set down to follow a path that she was never given instructions for. And as the man comes back with drinks, we see how aware Sally is of the situation she's in. Always being diligent and careful about things like drinks being spiked. Anne believes something is already broken inside of Sally, and perhaps she's right. But this is just another day for the man. He is unfazed and moves on to his next, younger target. Again, there is no choice here. Anne's body won't move. Two men approach, but their intentions seem pure, asking if the man is their dad. What they would do with this knowledge is unclear, but they seem to want to help. And when Anne expresses she isn't okay to Sally, Sally tells her to keep it together, to not ruin this. So Anne stays quiet. In my playthrough, which this footage isn't from, I chose to move from the man's approach. In this footage, Anne does not move, and the man non-consensually kisses her. And in both choices, the other men who asked Anne the question knew. And in both playthroughs, they silently judged. They did nothing. No intervening or anything. After all, the girls chose this for themselves, right? So it's okay to turn a blind eye, even if they might be in immense pain. And I think this sentiment is shared throughout society, and, well, we just have to be better. They all go back to the hotel, with Anne sitting outside of the room. But she expected it to be more dramatic. She didn't hear anything. Perhaps the most traumatic events happen in silence. Given the choice to walk around, Anne questions her decisions. And she knows the reality of transphobia, that people won't want to hire her. Now when they can hire a straight person instead. And then a damning sentence. I think on some level, I want to prove to myself that I'm a girl. As if she needs some external validation for that. But honestly, I get it. I've now made 2 videos on this channel discuss my own gender dysphoria, and in each one, I am clueless as how to answer that dilemma. I feel like I need some validation if I ever wanted to become a woman, or even non-binary. But more so, I feel like I need a reason. That I can't just want it for the sake of itself. But as I'll talk about later in this video, and as the game later discusses, this is a dangerous line of thinking. And throughout this sequence, we see Anne trying to convince herself that this is what she wants. That things will be okay. But then, a call from Mom. And even as we, the player, want to plead for help, Anne just can't do it. Then we see why. they'll never understand. Sally is finished. The man wants to see Anne again. And then, man, I'm getting emotional now. Just two damaged kids that want love and want to love, but just can't anymore. Because they weren't accepted. Because they thought to find acceptance in people that only wish to fetishize them. It's just, it's tragic. And more importantly, avoidable. I want to live in a world where kids like these can be accepted for who they are and will not stop until that happens. Don't think of the hand touching you inappropriately. Think of it like a hand placed on the shoulder. And then the ghost character we've been playing as this whole time, something akin to Poon Poon from Goodnight Poon Poon, is replaced with a girl. Perhaps this means Anne feels as if she is actualized as a girl because of the attention she is getting from this man, as she described earlier. That she was so dissociated before that she can never imagine it, but now she can. Or perhaps it's something entirely different. I'm really not sure. Anne chooses her favorite restaurant to meet up at. A mistake, as she will soon never be able to go back there. Because of the shame. Because now, something she used to love will be associated with nothing but trauma. There is no furniture in his house, but instead a nude poster of a woman. Something to be sought after. Smiling. Perhaps for the both of them. The man wants to be dressed like a girl. Perhaps even he feels repressed and secretly desires femininity. But perhaps it's too late for him now. As society has told him he can never express these things unless they're behind closed doors. That, as long as you're not flaunting it around in my face, it's whatever. But that's not expression or acceptance. It's just another form of transphobic repression. Because if you can't be your true self out there, out in public, you just won't feel self-actualization. You'll never feel like a girl. And now, instead of dealing with that, he is subjecting trans girls to horrific, traumatic experiences. And while I can understand him to some degree, I just can't accept that sort of behavior. At some point, you stop becoming just a victim of society and instead become a fellow perpetrator. It's sticky, it's messy, but it's something we just can't accept. That just because you may be in pain, you can deeply hurt and traumatize others. I, at least, can't accept that. Anne, in turn, completely dissociates, turning back into the ghost figure, leaving the pain to someone else. But her body is still experiencing that trauma. But surprisingly, during the pleasuring phase, Anne stops dissociating. Instead, she just felt uncomfortable, bored even. And yet, she still wishes for a god that wouldn't allow for such things to take place. She wishes to be saved. Which means, in reality, she never stopped dissociating. It's just in a different way. The kind that stops us from confronting our trauma. It's no longer bodily dissociation, but rather emotional dissociation. It wasn't agonizing enough to be unbearable. It wasn't terrifying enough to reject it. It was boring and uncomfortable, and I just wanted it to be over. This is the point where Anne loses touch with her own humanity, her own self-worth. The reality of trauma is this, that these traumatic events are just things that happen to us. That it doesn't have to feel like the entire world is ending, and that it's not some mystical, otherworldly feeling that is entirely impossible to comprehend. Rather, for some people, it's just an event. And when you emotionally dissociate, it starts to just feel like a chore. Because you have cut yourself off from conscious processing, leaving it to your eventual subconscious to deal with the repercussions. And then, one of the most damning parts of this particular traumatic event, Anne is made to feel like she has to be the attacker. That the onus is now on her. That she's the one entirely choosing to do these things. That she isn't allowed to feel hurt or traumatized. That not only because this is her job, but because she is supposed to be in control here. That theoretically, she can just leave at any moment. That she chose this. But I hope I've made it clear with this video that choices aren't so simple. They're just not. Anne is done with the job. She begins the long, long walk home. And things, they're not different. Everything is where she left it. The world cruelly just keeps turning. She feels just fine. And yet, the smell of him won't leave her vessel, her girly clothing. Her subconscious disgust and sadness grows ever stronger, even if her conscious self won't or can't acknowledge it. There is a line that stands out in my diary from back then. He fucked the girl out of me. I don't want to be a girl. And even if I'm unsure whether or not that is true, I know that I can't be. Because, as I discussed in my Hatsune Miku video, I sincerely feel like if I were to transition, or even become non-binary, then the power would be given to my sexual abusers. I feel as if they fucked the boy out of me, that transition would simply be running away from that self that I once was. That I'd be giving up. But conversely, or perhaps even because of that, I feel like they fucked the girl out of me too. That I was never given the chance to explore that side of myself because I feel like I have to be a man. That, again, I'd be giving up myself if I were to just come out and say, I feel like a woman. I can't live as a boy. And I can't live as a girl. So, instead, I live here, existing as nobody, an empty husk, a vessel, never given the chance to explore myself. Perhaps even I just experienced too much trauma at too early a point in my life. Really not sure. I don't want to run away, but I just don't know what to do anymore. And then Fuck, man. To view every economic transaction as a measurement of your own worth, of what you feel like is dictated by the micro rapes that have happened to you. It hurts. It just hurts. But despite everything, I want to be alive. I won't tell my friends. I won't tell my family. But damn it, I will make this video. While I may be a coward, it's the best I can do. At least for now. Sally admits her love to us. We finally have achieved the happy ending. Except a question lingers in her head. If Sally loved me, why did she let me do sex work? Why would you let that happen to someone you loved? But in the end, we couldn't ask her. The coldness. Nothing could reach it. Nothing could overcome. I mean, after all this shit, how could such a trivial thing as love reach it? We've been loved. We've been sought after. People even paid money to love us. Right? That question will linger over and over in our heads with no answer to come. Will anyone ever love me again? How could they when I'm worthless, dirty, defiled? I'm not worth it. Trust me, I'll just hurt you. These doubts play in our head without end. But then, a more important question, one that raises its voice over all the noise. After all of this, after all of this, after all of this immense pain, after being taught that love is something to be taken, to be paid for, after being taught that you can love someone with ever really accepting them, would I ever let anyone love me? And even after throwing away the clothes, we feel nothing. Roll the credits. Taylor and the team deserve it. So, is that it? A life lived in fear and pain with nothing to do about it? Honestly, I'm not sure. I haven't even found that question myself. At least not yet. But even if she consciously felt nothing from it, the facts are she did throw away the sex worker clothes. And even more importantly, she merged with her past self. And perhaps most importantly, the creator did make this game. Recovery will never happen if you don't come to accept what happened. And when you do that, you may expect to instantly feel not even necessarily better, but to at least feel something. But the truth is, it's hardly ever so easy. But it remains that she did throw out those clothes, that she did accept her past, that she did make this very game. And for myself, I made this video. I don't know what will happen in the future. Nobody does. But as often as I feel like a coward, I'm taking that first step. And Taylor is taking that first step. And I at least think that, for now, that's okay. That's enough for the time being. That things may never be okay again. That we may never feel love or lovable again. But hey, we might as well try, right? And, as always, thank you for watching.